Okay. Hello, everyone. This is the 2022 midterm forecast coming straight from DC. Um, we'll be going through some of the Senate races today, so let me pull up my map and get these going. This must be a reference for after the election. And hopefully my predictions will be right. We'll be giving margins and winners in these markets. So the first race that we're going to get to is the state of Florida. I don't expect Florida to be particularly competitive this go around. Um, but I do think that the margins are going to matter going forward. So right now I have Ron DeSantis winning that race by double digits. So there was a news story recently about, Donald Trump calling Ron DeSanctimonious, as, that they might have a battle in the 2024 primary for the Republican nomination for president. And while this might get ugly, um, I do think that Ron DeSantis is going to win this race by a lot more than Donald Trump did in 2020, and a lot more than Ron DeSantis did in 2018, before he, because he just narrowly won that race. I mean, he won it by under a percentage point, and it's crazy how much that race has changed the landscape. Because if the Democrat had won, Ron DeSantis wouldn't even be a figure that people would say are going for national office. So I think Ron DeSantis is going to win by 11 points, maybe even 12. This is a safe sweep seat, and it's going to be, for a budget margin in Florida is kind of considered a landslide. So there we go. Going up to the Senate race there, I do think Marco Rubio is going to win. I do think Val Demings has put up more of a campaign than Charlie Crist has. And even though Marco Rubio has been in the Senate longer than Ron DeSantis has been as governor, I think he is seen as a little bit more of a career politician and is not going to win by the same margin that Ron DeSantis has, but still with the incumbent, I expect Marco Rubio to win by around 8 or 9 points. This was a similar margin to what he did in 2016 when Donald Trump only won by around 2 points in 2016. So next up, we're going to move a little bit north to the state of Georgia. So Georgia has a pretty similar dynamic to the state of Florida in that the Republican incumbent governor, I think, is going to run ahead of the senator there. But so I think Brian Kemp is going to win this race by close to double digits, but not quite there. I'm expecting an 8 to 9 point victory by Brian Kemp over Stacey Abrams, and this is again a rematch of 2018. Brian Kemp narrowly won this race in 2018. He avoided a runoff by getting over 30% of the vote. And I expect Brian Kemp to get anywhere in the range of 53 to 54 votes and clearly avoid a runoff. But the more exciting race in Georgia this go around is the Senate race between Raphael Warnock, who's the incumbent Democratic senator, and Herschel Walker, who's the celebrity football player there. And I've been saying this for a while before other people were saying this. I think this is going to be a very competitive race, even with Herschel Walker's baggage, just because I think at the end of the day, even though Biden won this state in 2020, he won it very narrowly, and I think that was a little bit of a fluke. I still think Georgia is a Republican-leaning state, not as much as it has been in the past. Still part of the Bible Belt, and even with Atlanta, being a pretty big Democratic urban center, I do think at the end of the day, this is a Republican state, and it's why Brian Kemp is going to win by points. I don't think either candidate is going to get above in Georgia, and this is similar to what happened in the 2020 Senate campaign when David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, none of them got above 50%, and the Republicans both ended up losing in the runoff in January. So I do think that Herschel Walker is going to be ahead on election night. I don't think he's going to hit that magic 50% plus one number. And so in that case, it's going to go to a runoff that will not be in January like it was in 2021. It's going to be in December. So it's going to be a little bit closer. And I frankly, I'm going to predict it at the time. I don't know what's going to happen in the runoff. But I do think Herschel Walker will be ahead on election night, but that race will be undecided until later. So next up, I want to move up the coast to the state of Pennsylvania. I think Pennsylvania is going to be one of the most critical races in the 2022 midterms. On the governorship level, I do not think it's going to be as close. Um, I think Josh Shapiro is going to win this race pretty handily. I don't think it's going to be particularly competitive. The Republicans have not been funding Doug Frustrana's campaign for the governorship, and I think partly because he is a little bit of a problematic candidate. He does not have the maybe more moderate mainstream appeal. So I think Josh Shapiro is going to win that race by about 6 or 7 points, similar maybe to what Brian Kemp's going to do in Georgia. So let's see what's going to happen in the Senate race. I think the Senate race is going to be the most competitive race in the 2022 midterms between Dr. Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman. This is the race that's been garnering the most media attention. It's the race that the most money has been poured into. Pennsylvania is a very big state. And I think it's the fifth most populous state in the U.S. And these are both pretty high-profile candidates with a national image. People even knew who Dr. Oz was before he even moved into politics. He's the celebrity doctor. In this race, I think it's going to be too close to call on election day just because of how Pennsylvania counts their votes. I think this race has been definitely in John Fetterman's advantage before just recently. I do think that on election night, we won't know who the winner is. I don't even think on Wednesday you're going to know who the winner is. I do think this race is going to be decided between 0.5 percentage points. And I think it's going to be the only race that is like that. So I don't have a high level of confidence in predicting a winner. If I had to predict a winner right now, I would say that Dr. Oz might have the slightest edges. And that is mainly due to the debate performance that Dr. Fetterman or that John Fetterman had. I do think there'll be enough split to get voting between the governorship and the Senate that Dr. Oz will be able to barely pull it off, but it's going to be within a percentage point, in my opinion. Next up, moving to the state of Arizona. This is also one of the very, very high-profile races in the 2022 midterms. Carrie Lake is kind of one of these national figures as well, who's been gaining a lot of national attention. People are even talking about her to be a potential vice presidential or presidential candidate in 2024, even before she's even had her interest in the politics, really. She hasn't won a political race. She was a TV news reporter before. In the primary, Carrie Lake, I think, was a little bit overestimated in the polls, which kind of gives me a little bit of pause to predict it right now. The prediction markets have her doing very, very well, over 80%. But the polls have it a bit closer, and I still think this is almost nearly a toss-up. I do think at the end of the day, Carrie Lake is going to win this race by 1 percentage point. I'm doing this live video on election day before any of the polls have closed. There have been some things I've been seeing on Twitter, the polling machines not working, and to that effect. So I think there's going to be a lot of litigating, a lot of accusations on both sides on what's happening in Arizona. We might not know on election day who the next governor is, but I think Carrie Lake will end up pulling this race out by a very, very small margin. In terms of the Senate race, I think this is going to be one of the races that's going to have some split ticket voting as well. I do think Mark Kelly is going to be able to pull it off. He is the incumbent senator there. He has positioned himself as a moderate. He's an astronaut. He won this race in 2020 by around 3 percentage points when Donald Trump lost it only by when Joe Biden won it by less than a percentage point. So there's obviously some split second voting there. So I do think that Mark Kelly does have some um, appeal to moderates there. So I'm expecting the Democrats to hold the Senate in Arizona and the Republicans to hold the governorship in Arizona. And moving north just one state is the state of Nevada. And Nevada currently has an incumbent senator and an incumbent governor. This is one race. This has been seen as kind of the easiest peg up for Republicans in the 2022 cycle on the governor and Senate level. In the past, Nevada has traditionally been a very Democratic state. Harry Reid was from here. They had the Democratic turnout machine called the Reid machine. And the Democratic Party held a lot of power here. I think in this cycle, both the governor's race and the Senate race are going to go towards the Republicans. Um, John Rawlstein, one of the most prominent political reporters in Nevada, called for the Republicans to win the governorship and the Democrats to retain the Senate. But I do think this prediction is going to be wrong. I think that on both the uh, governorship and in the Senate level, the Republicans going to win by 3 points. So, and that isn't necessarily particularly close if you zoom out and look at all the close races. And 3 points is a pretty dominant win. So that is what I think is going to happen there. And moving across the the country, let's go to the state of Wisconsin. There's also a governor's and Senate race there. I do think that Ron Johnson is going to be able to hold the seat. In 2016, everyone thought he was going to lose this race. He ended up holding on to it. I think this is going to happen again, even though I think the majority of people do think that Ron Johnson is going to hold on to this race. I think he's going to probably win by 4 or 5 points, even to outperform the polls a little bit there. And I think on the governor's level, this race is expected to be a little bit more close because there is an incumbent Democrat. In fact, the one that knocked off Scott Walker, Ivers in 2018. But I do think that the governorship is going to go back towards the Republicans. I do think that Michelle is going to win it by around a 2 point margin, so less than the margin that Ron Johnson is going to win. Next up, staying in the Midwest, I do want to go to the Ohio races. I don't think Ohio is going to be particularly competitive, but it has been getting a lot of national attention. The governor, Mike DeWine, the incumbent governor, who I think is pretty similar in respects to, John Kasich, a pretty moderate governor who barely won in 2018, just narrowly won. But I think he's going to win by that 20 plus points in 2022. He's really positioned himself as a moderate and even has gotten in trouble with some of the more MAGA base potentially. So, yeah, that'll be interesting there. Also, if anyone wants to go into the chat to let me know if my audio is working well. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me and that the people can ask questions there. But yeah, going on to the other races in Ohio. So I do think that the Senate race in Ohio is going to be a little bit closer. I do think JD Vance is going to pull it off and win by 6 points, which is less than what Donald Trump won it in 2020. He won it by 8 points, and he also won it by 8 points in 2016. And so there's that. And then next up, I just want to go through the states that really only have a competitive Senate race. And in North Carolina, I do think that Ted Budd is going to beat Sherry Beasley at 4 points. This is a state that, has a Democratic governor, but on a national level, last time we switched to Democrats was 2008 for Barack Obama. And I mean, even though it was pretty close to the presidential level in 2020, I do think Republican leaning year. I do think Ted Budd, who's a pretty traditional Republican candidate, Sherby's is pretty traditional Democratic candidate. I think this is probably what is going to happen. Next up, going to New Hampshire. New Hampshire is going to garner a lot of attention. It's probably going to be the race that we know the outcome of at the very beginning. They're very good at counting their votes. I do think that the incumbent Democrat, Hassan, is going to be able to hold on by around 2 points. In Colorado, I think people thought that Michael Bennett would be particularly vulnerable here. He's not a super popular incumbent candidate, which kind of surprised me. I don't know exactly why. But I do think he'll be able to hold on and win this race by about 5 points. And then in Washington, I do think the incumbent Democrat Murray will be able to hold on by around 6 points. And I'm hoping to keep this live video under 20 minutes. So let's see how that goes. Let me just do a little mic check here. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we could all hear me. And please write any questions that you have in the chat if you want me to answer them. Except, going to Texas, people thought this race would be more competitive than I think it actually will be. I think Greg Abbott will win the state by around 6 points. The incumbent there in Michigan. I think people thought, recently Tudor Dixon was making a surge, the Republican challenger, but I do think Gretchen Whitmer will be able to hold on to the seat and win by about 3 points. The New York governor's race has gotten a bunch of attention recently. Kathy Hochul, she was appointed after Andrew Cuomo had a scandal and dropped out. And Zeldin, the Republican challenger, has been getting a lot of traction in the polls, and especially in such a Democratic stronghold as New York is. I do think Kathy Hochul will be able to hold on to the seat by that 8 points. So, I mean, it definitely is a little bit surprising that it is even that close, but there you go. Next up, going to Kansas. I do think Kelly's going to hold on the Democratic incumbent by 1 point, which is surprising. I do think what we saw with the abortion amendment that there are some moderate voters. Kansas is not as partisan as you might think. New Mexico, I think the Democrats going to hold on by 1 percentage point. I think it's going to be closer than people think. And in Oklahoma, I do think that the current governor is going to hold on by 7 points. And in Oregon, I do think Kotek is going to hold on by 2 points. So thank you all for joining my live stream, and I'll keep people updated throughout the day.